Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I'm your librarian, Katrina, and Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month we are looking at all the ways the government hates we the people, making this week's book You Might Go to Prison Even Though You're Innocent by Justin Brooks. I actually did have a cocktail looked up and not quite ready to go. I didn't have everything I needed for it, and then I caught a cold, so I've decided instead to pour a shot of whiskey into some hot tea because according to Google AI, which I'm going to throw up over here, it can help. And I will do no further research on this subject and will thank you for respecting my beliefs in this. So let's do this. I am doing lemon ginger tea with honey whiskey since lemon and honey are both supposed to be good for you. So, yeah, see, honey whiskey. Not sponsored. All right. Now, in last week's book, Whoa. Oh, no. Oh, bummer. I dropped the lid to my whiskey bottle. I don't want to risk spilling it. I'm 5'4", and most of that height comes from my legs. I'm like, all leg and no torso here. It's very weird. Last week's book, 3 Felonies a Day, we looked at the white collar shit that can land you in jail, right? Which is not what the vast majority of us worry about. Most of us don't work in white collar positions. We don't really care if, some CEO somewhere lands himself in hot water, which we should. Because if they can go after the very wealthiest of us, well, we all know they can definitely go after the poorest of us, right? The average Joe walking down the street doesn't really wonder, though, if their job as a convenience store clerk is going to run them afoul of a U.S. district attorney somewhere who has a hard-on for proving themselves in a creative way of reading statutes. That's just not something that most people worry about. This week, however, is all about the average Joe. Nice, warm tea. All about the average Joe and how you can find yourselves running afoul of your local district attorney and end up losing years of your life due to an overzealous justice system that cares less for justice and more for closing cases for their constituents. This book is broken into 10 chapters, which encompass the fact that basically, if you breathe, you could wind up in prison for life. That's actually not hyperbole. If you hire the wrong attorney, not all public defenders are bad. They're not all created equally, don't get me wrong. Some of them are not the best. But they're not all bad either. And hiring the wrong attorney in lieu of using a public defender can have catastrophic consequences for your case. Yeah, I feel stronger already. His case in this chapter was from Chicago, where Marilyn Malaro accepted a plea deal on advice of her attorney. She found herself accused of murder. I think she was accused of shooting somebody. And rather than, all of her friends and family freaked out, said, no, don't go with the public defender. They don't care about you. Just, hire an attorney. So she did. And that attorney was so bad at his job that she accepted a plea deal that did not remove the death penalty from the table and found herself on death row with a plea deal. So she pled guilty to murder and ended up on death row. Even arguing ineffective counsel, which, really, I'm not sure how the courts could look at this and go, yeah, that was ineffective counsel. Didn't get her a reduction in sentence. She just, and they eventually got her off death row. I forget the mechanism by which they did it. And then ultimately she was freed when it was found that the police who did the investigation was corrupt himself. But who the hell pleads guilty to murder with the expectation of the death penalty? Hell, at least a jury trial would have given her a 50-50 shot of walking out a free woman. Regardless, it's absurd. The problem is clearly high-reaching in the judiciary too, but there it is. She was left to just deal with the fact that she had a shit attorney who apparently after she pled guilty and was still sentenced to death, quit law and became a priest. I feel like there's some justice in that. You should definitely not have been practicing law if you didn't even have the sense to say, my client will plead guilty, but you have to remove the death penalty. And that's like Law and Order 101. You could watch any of the million cop shows out there and know that that's the very first thing you should do as a defense attorney is say, yes, we'll talk about a plea, but you got to take death off the table. Couldn't be bothered to do that. Fucking mind-boggling. If you are in a relationship and living with a person and they are murdered, you are the primary suspect. Even if you have a rock-solid alibi, police will hyper-focus on you. Even if there's a more likely suspect, you are going to be their first pick because you live with them. So of course you are. The fact that other people in the world look like you. Science estimates that globally, everyone has approximately 6 people that look a lot like them. And there are a hell of a lot more other people that look kind of like you. enough that you ever walk down a street and look at a face and think, I know that person. And they go, oh no, I don't know that person. That's not actually John or Bob or Mary or whoever you thought it was, right? If one of those kind of lookalikes commits a crime, the police could arrest you. And then the victim makes an ID based on you kind of look like the person who did it. And the jury eats up eyewitness testimony, even though eyewitness testimonies are one of the most fallible forms of identification. And the human brain is notoriously bad at remembering things, and then convincing itself that it remembers things accurately. Hey, newsflash, you don't, all right? When you've been the victim of a crime, you just want justice to be done. So when the police line up a group of people, show you a photo array, whatever, you kind of assume the police, who are professionals here, did their job and are showing you at least one of the people who must have been involved, right? Well, there are lots of ways that police can direct a witness to the perp of their choice and feed confirmation bias on their own end. Now, DNA testing has come a long way and can actually help save innocent people when it's even tested, and assuming the facility doing the testing is honest. It's one of the other ways you can end up legally fucked. And there have been massive settlements and prisoners released when faulty or flat out fraudulent lab results are discovered. He reports one presentation he attended by Bill Thompson, and in the slide deck of inaccurate results was a note from a technician to a detective saying, quote, I've done the testing several times, but it keeps coming out wrong. It keeps not matching your suspect, end quote. How much more corrupt do you have to be? It's absolutely absurd that this is a thing. I mean, my God. Hollywood, for their part, has done massive damage on this front. I mean, first with their nice pat 45-minute TV shows where cutting-edge science always has the results, and if they don't match, then the technician and detectives go back to the drawing board and try again. And so that is what people assume happens. In reality, that is not what happens. All too often, the results are innocent lost to this harsh, undeserved sentences because people double down on their own confirmation bias, that which is covered a lot in next week's book. But it is absolutely absurd how often labs are wrong and they cover it up or bury it under scientific jargon that the lay people, the people sitting on the jury, don't understand. Don't even get me started on lie detectors, man. It's most decidedly against the principles upon which this country's justice system was founded. I mean, we're basically go off of English common law, right? The gold standard for that law's text remains Sir William Blackstone, right? And I know people are like, ooh, Blackstone, he's the bastard who came up with the rule of thumb, and you can beat your wife with a branch that's no more than a thumb, thickness of your thumb, which incidentally is bullshit. That's not anywhere in Blackstone's law. I don't remember which book I read that in, but it's not in Blackstone's law. Blackstone did famously say, quote, it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than that one innocent suffer, end quote. And that is a principle that is clearly not emphasized in modern law schools because innocent suffers all the time. Innocent people are sentenced to lose decades of their lives because of incompetent or corrupt police officers and judiciary and district attorneys. The system is very much stacked against we the people, despite, being paid for by our tax dollars. You might falsely confess, which is covered, like I said, greater depth in next week's book, but is important because most people think that they would never confess to something they didn't do. Would never do that. I mean, centuries of criminal trials, going all the way back to the witch trials of the Dark Ages up through modern court systems, prove that that's absolutely not true. If you're tired, typo, if you're tired, hungry, being yelled at by people who seem authoritative, you absolutely might confess. All right? And you might confess and bring others down with you because, you can get a couple of more people off the streets who could be bad people. Sure, why not? Alternatively, someone could flat out lie about you. Not just as famously talked about, like false rape allegations, right? That's the big one. That gets a lot of media traction, and it should. They're abhorrent on every level. And first off, false rape allegations undermine true rape allegations, makes people think, oh, that girl lied, maybe this girl's lying, right? But then they send innocent people to prison, ruin decades of their lives. The most infamous of trial ruses, right? I'm not lying, right? Lying, the obvious false allegations, okay. But the most infamous of trial ruses, the jailhouse snitch, could get up on the stand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and then lie about you. Just lie their asses off and swear that you confessed only to them. Jailhouse snitch testimony should be illegal. Like 100%, this should not be a thing. No joke. Should absolutely, categorically be prohibited in the justice system. Oh my God. Work around kids. Oh man, have a kid who's generally sick. Um, have kids of your own. I mean, hell, pray every night for their safety, because if the kid falls over and bumps their head, you could end up in prison. Whether you live in the country or in the city, are poor, rich from last week's book, or a person of color, if you breathe, just remember, the government hates you. They're fully capable of throwing you in prison, even though you're completely innocent. The government does not always care about the truth. They care that their conviction rates look good so they can win their next election. Thomas Sowell, who said, their government cares about three things, right? First, getting elected, second, getting reelected, and whatever three is, it's far, hell, and gone from anything that's going to do you any good. I'm paraphrasing that one. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, all right? It's horrifying, don't get me wrong. It's absolutely mind-boggling, the hoops that can be jumped through to make sure that the wrong person is convicted just so they can clear the case. But Brooks does highlight some prosecutors who cared enough when a miscarriage of justice was brought to their attention that they did the right thing and requested release for the wrong party. And innocence projects are spreading globally. I mean, when I read Amanda Knox's book, Free, My Search for Meaning, last June, remember she returned to Italy to speak at an innocence conference there, which was just insanely brave of her, because they absolutely could have carried the grudge and sought any reason to re-imprison her. So that was insanely brave of her to do. And Brooks talks about the impact innocence projects have had and the net positive effect they've had on local legislatures, pushing for reforms in how interrogations are conducted, requiring DNA testing when it's present, which again goes back to the honesty of the lab involved, but it's a step forward at least. Requiring agencies to record interrogations is also a good step. And that means from the moment somebody walks in there, doesn't even have to be the official interrogation has started, but from the second somebody is sitting in a room talking to a detective, doesn't matter if they're actually under caution, if they've been advised of their Miranda rights, none of that's relevant. As soon as they're sitting down in the police station, it should be recorded. Because how can we possibly know what sort of undue pressures were brought to bear on somebody in interrogation if we don't see the entire thing? Yeah, a lot more on that next week. Police body cams have been helpful too, although that's more to ensure the arrests themselves occur lawfully, not that the person under arrest is actually guilty. Innocent until proven guilty is the maxim of this country, at least it used to be. It's a little harder to say now. My personal pet peeve is the private prison industry. And if the government has so many laws that it cannot house its incarcerated populace and must outsource that job to private industry, perhaps that government has too many laws to properly serve its populace. It's just food for thought there. And of course, there's the perennial legal for a price, meaning if you have the money and can pay the fine, then arguably it's legal. You just got to pay for it, right? Versus those who cannot pay a fine and then hit with late fees for not paying the fine and court fees for not paying the fine, and they get bench warrants for their arrest, which they end up in jail and they can't work, which means they really can't pay the fine. There's a lot of reform is needed. Our criminal justice system is a hot fucking mess right now. And it won't be easy because very few people are willing to break out of their comfort zone and see that justice is in fact done. I mean, until injustice is knocking at their door, then suddenly they care an awful lot. This book was quite well done. Right? He includes a lot of case files for innocent people that he's been able to help out. Some that took an Alford plea, which Alford plea is where you agree to plead guilty to the crime after, X length of time, and you'll be released on time served. All right. And this prevents civil litigation, basically, for saying he wrongfully imprisoned me. And the lawyers, it's heartbreaking and touching at the same time, because they'll have people who are offered an Alford deal, but they don't want to let the lawyers down. If the lawyer wants to keep fighting, the lawyer's like, man, I 100% get you, right? You don't want to spend another day in prison. This is your decision to make. You're not going to disappoint me no matter what you choose. And it's kind of heartbreaking that, they get somebody in their corner and they feel like they have to keep fighting. Oh, of course, then there's a guy who refused to accept an Alford plea because he didn't do it. And he was madder than hell that he'd spent 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't do, and now they're trying to force him to accept an Alford plea, them being the district attorney, not his attorneys. I mean, it just there was a lot of sadness in here, but a lot of hope too. I slept in 3 days because of this fucking cold. The book was well done. It's an easy read. I think I read it in like 4 days. It was horrifying and heartbreaking to see the stolen lives that occurred through the gross miscarriage of justice, which is allowed to continue in our land of the free. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.